Well, everyone, we are back in our Shining Light series, back in the Gospel of John. I'm really excited to dive back into this series. And with that being said, we are going to be in this series now for the next couple of months, from now until June, at least. So we've got several weeks to be there. And I'm really excited to just start plugging away at this gospel and continuing to see what God has for us, and continuing to see the way that God shines light on Jesus, and the way he shines light on who Jesus is and what he's done for us. And so with that being said, a little bit about where we've been is we've been John 1 through 5 so far is what we've done. And we've also done a little bit of John 12 for last year's Holy Week and Palm Sunday. And then we've done John 18 through 21 as well in a series called Doubt. So we've covered a lot of the Gospel of John. It just doesn't look like we've covered a terrible amount of the Gospel of John. And so with that being said, I'm excited as we're kind of mapping things out and we're kind of looking to see we can finish the Gospel of John before Christmas this year, as we will be ending in John 17. So that seems like a weird place to end. It's not quite at the end, but we've already covered those chapters, John 18 through 21, earlier last year. So so it may seem kind of like a weird stopping point, but we have covered the entire gospel at that point. And so if, as I always say though, God can direct us in any way he wants, and that's why we took a break from it to do the love series, because I was just going to start plugging away, and God was like, no, we gotta do this. And so the love series was a really great series for me, as I kept looking and studying the different attributes of the different love languages that are found in Jesus. And so if you're catching us for the first time though, thepointofocus.com is where you can go and find all of these episodes for our Shining Light series. If you go to our YouTube channel especially, I actually just got done doing this, but we updated them all the Shining Light episodes, all the Gospel of John episodes are in a playlist. And so you can just go through there and see where we've been, because if you look just through our main area, it's going to be hard to kind of pinpoint them. But in that playlist, they're all in order from episode 1 in the series all the way down. And there's 31 episodes, I believe, that we've been in this gospel. So they're all there. The different series that we've done as well. It's all mapped out there for you. And as well as the love series and any other series that we've done in the past. And you can, once again, thepointofocus.com has it as well. It's just they're in order by how we've done them. So it'd be a little harder to, if you just want to look at the Gospel of John, they're in that playlist on our YouTube channel. So with that being said, also at thepointofocus.com, you can also just find out more information about us, who we are, and what we've been doing. So as I said, we last were in John chapter 5, and we spent the month of January in John chapter 5. And so just a little bullet points about that book. About that chapter. It starts off with the question, would you like to get well? And he's talking to the lame man, and that goes and sits by the pool. And would you like to get well? And we talked about how that's Jesus calling to us. It wasn't when you first look at it, it's kind of like Jesus is asking a stupid question, that a crippled man, well, obviously he wants to get well. Obviously he wants to get healed. If you know anybody with a chronic illness, they obviously want to get healed. They obviously want to be better. But Jesus was asking that, would you like to get well? Not just because, but because Jesus had bigger plans in that question. And we looked at it as, would you like to get well? Things aren't going well in our life. Things aren't going good in our life, or whatever. Would you like to get well? Would you like to know Jesus? And then he ends that section that we looked at in that, he ends that section with, now that you're well. And so we just use those two things. Would you like to get well? And now that you're well, let's go and be who we are meant to be be with Jesus. And then we looked at how Jesus is God, and we because he started talking about how he doesn't, the Father and all of this stuff, and he continues to work even if it's the Sabbath. We talked about how the work of God never ends, and therefore the work of Jesus never ends. God is always at work, and Jesus was saying, therefore I'm always at work. I'm always doing the things. And then as followers of Jesus, we talked about how our work never ends. We should always be doing the work of Jesus. And then we saw how the name of Jesus has power. That's our overall theme for the Gospel of John. Started in our Word of the Year episode last year for 2025. Our Word of the Year was believe. And we in John 20:31, it says that these things so we may continue to believe and have life by the power of the name of Jesus. And this year we're looking at peace with John 16:33, where it says, I've told you these things so that you may have peace in me. And so Jesus has power to save, or the power to not to, but we have a choice to believe. We can choose to believe in Jesus and have life, or choose not to believe in Jesus and have death. It's plain and simple. That's the choice that we have. And then the testimonies of Jesus, we saw in that episode that the Gospel of John lists out some testimonies, and how we've already looked at in John 1 and a little bit later on too, but the John 1, where it talks about John the Baptist. And we looked at how John the Baptist was a testimony for Jesus, and how the works of Jesus, which we're looking at this in the Shining Light series, that's what this is about, is the works of Jesus. What Jesus did is a testimony of Jesus. And then the testimony of the Father, what God says about Jesus. And then the Bible, what the Bible says about Jesus. And so we looked at those, the handful of things in that testimony is important. Our testimony is important. It's not just what Jesus did, but what Jesus has done for us. Not what Jesus has done for us, but how that's changed our life. It's the power of the blood and the testimony. And so as we get into John chapter 6, so if you have a copy of the Bible, whether it's paper or electronic, you can open it on up. John chapter 6 is where we are going to be today. And we are going to see, so also in the Gospel of John, there are I am statements, and there are signs, like the 7 signs and wonders of Jesus. And so also in John 6, we're going to see the first I am statement here, actually next episode. So that's really fun. We're going to crack that open, and there are also 7 of those. But these 7 signs, so we saw it in John 2 with Jesus turning water into wine. We saw the official son being healed, and that was in John 4. John 5, the healing of the pool of Bethesda that I just talked about. And then in John 6, we're going to see the feeding of the 5,000 and Jesus walking on water. So in this episode, we're going to get 2 of them. Originally, we had it mapped out for them to be separated, so we could talk about each one of them individually. But we course corrected. We did some changing and things like that. And we looked at Holy Week independently of the Gospel of John, instead of having this Shining Light series be a part of our Holy Week discussion. So with that being said, we're going to see these two different signs of Jesus in this episode. So let's read John chapter 6. It says, after Jesus crossed over to the far side of the Sea of Galilee, it says after this. So what happened in John 5? So all that conversation that we just kind of talked about, all the different things that Jesus said and whatever he was doing in John 5. It says, after this, Jesus crossed over to the far side of the Sea of Galilee, also known as the Sea of Tiberias. A huge crowd kept following him wherever he went, but because they saw the miraculous signs as he healed the sick. Then Jesus climbed a hill and sat down with his disciples around him. It was nearly time for the Jewish Passover celebration. Jesus saw the huge crowd coming toward him. Turning to Philip, he asked, "Where can we buy bread to feed all these people?" He was only testing Philip because he knew what he was going to do. Philip replied, even if we worked for months, we wouldn't have enough money to feed them." Then Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up. "There is a young boy with 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what good is that with this huge crowd?" "Tell everyone to sit down," Jesus said. So they all sat down on the grassy slopes. The men alone numbered 5,000. Then Jesus took the loaves, gave thanks to God, and distributed them up to the people. Afterward, he did the same with the fish, and they all had as much as they wanted. After everyone was full, Jesus told his disciples, "Now gather the leftovers so that nothing is wasted." So they picked up the pieces and filled 12 baskets with the scraps left by the people who had eaten the 5 barley loaves. When the people saw him do this miraculous sign, they exclaimed, "Surely he is the prophet we've been expecting." And when Jesus saw they were ready to force him to be their king, he slipped away. He slipped away into the hills by himself. We're going to stop there. We are going to read 16 through 21, but I wanted to stop here and let's look at this part of the story, and then we're going to look at this last little bit. So first it tells us is that John is going to record the Galilee region, and so it's north of Judea, and so he's mainly John mainly records things that Jesus did and said in Judea and Jerusalem, but sometimes included materials that the other gospel writers also wrote of. So this is in all 4 gospels. This miracle is in all 4 gospels, and it's one of 2. The other one is the resurrection, of course. So he writes this in here to include this, because this is one of those things that's a sign of who Jesus is. And that's what John's gospel is about. Who Jesus is, what he's done, so that we may have life, so we may continue to believe and have life by the power of his name. It's the whole purpose and point of his gospel. So, John is the only one of the 4 gospel writers who told us that this took place near the time of the Passover. So maybe this multitude following Jesus and doing all of that was because they were traveling in for Passover or whatever. So this is what's happening here. Okay? So now we get into Philip being asked this question. Why where are we going to feed these people? Okay? It also comes in Matthew 15 and Matthew 14, where this account is in the Gospel of Matthew. They say they want Jesus to send the people home, right? It's late, go there, and Jesus simply says, "You feed them." It's clear that they had been listening to Jesus teach, so naturally Jesus would want to provide for them. So these people had gathered, they were listening to Jesus, and they wanted. And he wanted to provide for them. He wanted to take care of them. This is one of those instances where he's a good shepherd, right? He wouldn't let his sheep go hungry. Jesus knew what miracle he was about to perform, but he wanted the opportunity to teach his disciples. Philip had already seen Jesus do many miracles, and there should have been no question about what Jesus could do. There should have been no question about the resources he had and all of these things. And Jesus often does the same thing for us. Jesus often asks us to do something to see if we are going to trust him. Ask us for something, to do something, whatever, to see if we're going to trust him. After all, we've seen him do wonderful things for us as well. You know, the disciples often get like a bummer. Well, they were right there. How could they be so stupid? And not like they saw Jesus turn water into wine, and they saw Jesus do this and that, and heal this man and do this, but they can't believe that he's going to feed 5,000 people with this small little lunch that he had. And this is the problem is Philip has the same problem that we have. The Philip and the disciples. we have the same problem. We often look at our problems and think they're too big for Jesus. Whoa, 5,000 people. Not to mention, another gospel says that they're including women and children. Okay? So, one gospel writer makes it clear to note that there was more than probably just 5,000 people here. But it's customary that women often got left out of accounts. They weren't credible, like these different kind of things. Women were looked at different back in the Bible time. So the fact that John wrote 5,000 men wasn't against the cultural norm. Including the women in the count would have been against the norm. But like, you've got to figure that maybe someone had their mom there, someone had their wife there, someone had their kids there, like these kind of things. So it says including women and children. So this was a big miracle that Jesus did. Okay? But we often look at these things, whoa, you can't, wow. You know, like, I've got this bill to pay, I've got this to do, like this health problem, all of these different things. We look at it like it's too big for Jesus, or like he doesn't know what's going to happen, or what he's going to do, or how he's going to help us. Jesus is unlimited. What if we started to look at Jesus in that way, instead of limiting him? What if we started looking at Jesus like he's the bottomless supplier of everything that we ever need? And what if we started looking at Jesus in that way? What if we started to see Jesus as unlimited? And we stopped putting limitations on him. Oh, Jesus, you can't help me with that. Well, Jesus, there's no way we're going to feed 5,000 people. With this, how will that do with so many, they said. Jesus is unlimited. And he does the same things that he does to his disciples. He wanted to teach them, hey, what do we got? And looking to see what they were going to do. And he does the same thing for us. Hey, what are we going to do here? And so then we look at, it's noted that it's barley loaves. Okay? Barley was cheap. It was regarded as a simple, poor person food. It was meant really for the animals than for people. This means that the boy's family was likely poor if he had just these 5 barley loaves. And this idea that it was worth as much as wheat, and all these different kinds of things. So this was like a poor person's lunch, really. It wasn't high class. The fish were small and ready to be eaten. So with the barley, like, it was just this. Maybe he was going home for dinner. Maybe it was just his lunch that he had. Whatever the case is. You know, it could be that he was taking that home for his family. And Jesus took it. There's a lot of things going on. But once again, they were being put under, like, their limited human sight was limiting what Jesus was going to do. Also, we see here that Jesus was in no panic or hurry, right? We see the disciples, in the Gospel of Matthew especially, the disciples are like, hey, it's late, send them home so they can at least get something to eat before the stores close. You know, hey, like, the party went on a little longer, we need to get to Meijer so we can have dinner, like it's that kind of thing, right? Jesus wasn't in a panic. He had a job to fulfill. He had something to do. But he went about it in an orderly way. Jesus does everything in order. 1 Corinthians 14:40 tells that let everything be done decently and in order. There's an order to life. We often run around, we're panicked and we're in a hurry and all of these things, and it's just like, sit down and breathe. Let's do things in order. Because I pictured the disciples were like, well, we got to feed these people. If not, they got to go find somewhere to eat. The stores are going to close. What are we going to do? All we have is this loaf. All we have is this right here. Jesus was never panicked or in a hurry. He's never surprised. He's never caught off guard. He's never rattled. And Jesus invites us into his work. The disciples brought the 5 loaves and the 2 fish to Jesus. Jesus didn't go get it. Jesus didn't tell the boy to bring it here. He asked his disciples, what are we going to do? And his disciples went and got it. Jesus does the same thing for us. He invites us into his work. Jesus deliberately chose a mess that brought the disciples into his work. And that's what he calls us to do. He calls us into his work. After all, things can't get done without us coming into the work of Jesus. And then, what always has gotten me from this story, okay, is they ate as much as they wanted. It says, after everyone was full. Seconds, thirds, eat your fill. It doesn't say after everybody had ate their little bit, they went away hungry. Like, Jesus fed them to the full. He provided them he provided everything they needed in that moment to the full, where nobody was hungry, nobody was they ate what they wanted. They ate what they needed. Jesus did that. They were completely, and then it's important to note here too, that there were 12 baskets left over. This wasn't just like this was one of their baskets that they used for fish or bulky items that they carried, right? Jesus even took care of his disciples. 12 baskets left over for his disciples. So I wonder if any point in the time the disciples were like, well, this is all good. These people are eating like pigs. What are we going to do? And Jesus provided for them. Jesus cared for them as well. Even in this moment, he knew they were hungry. He knew that they needed food. Not just because he's Jesus, but because he's human. Jesus ate. This is why I keep saying it over and over and over again. Jesus was human in order to understand us. And it's important to know when we see things like this, Jesus knew the people were hungry. Jesus knew they needed fed, but Jesus also knew his disciples needed fed because he was human. He probably was like, hey, I could use some bread and fish too. Jesus was taking care of all the people. Then he ran. Not ran, okay, but he decided it was time to leave because Jesus wanted them to want him, not because of what he will do, not because he'll do something for them, right? Oh, he fed us. He must be that prophet. He must be that person. Let's make him king. Like, that was the people, like I said it last year when we were looking at, in our Doubt series, when we were looking at Palm Sunday, we saw that the people's mindset was always to make him some kind of political ruler, some kind of king, some kind of authority to overthrow what was going on. That's what they envisioned Jesus to be. And this wasn't any different. They were going to make him king. And Jesus wasn't just like assuming it. Jesus knew the people. Jesus knew the hearts of the people. God, after all, right? But Jesus wasn't impressed or seduced by a crowd that wanted to make him king. He turned his back on the crowd and went to pray because Jesus was more interested in being with his Father in heaven than hearing the applause of the crowd. Jesus wanted the people to just simply want him. Not because they healed people. Because, we saw, right? He healed people, so the crowd was following him around. Jesus wanted people, though, to be there because they wanted him, not because he could do something for them. I've often said that before, just in this series, Shining Light, is Jesus just wants us. He doesn't want us to want him because we can have our lives changed by him or anything like that, much like what's happening here. Oh, he fed us. He must be that prophet. He must be that person. He must be what's going on. He must be all of that. Like, that's not what Jesus wanted for the people. He wanted them to want him because they wanted him, not because he could give them something. And so Jesus dismisses his disciples, okay, and he's gone off to pray and to do what Jesus has to do, right? And he often slips away by himself. Like, this is something that Jesus does, and we can learn something about that at a different time. But this John chapter 6, verse 16, it says, "That evening, when the disciples went down to the shore to wait for him." That evening, Jesus' disciples went down to the shore to wait for him. But as darkness fell, and Jesus hadn't come back, they got into the boat and headed across the lake toward Capernaum. Soon a gale swept down upon them, and the sea grew very rough. They rowed for 3 to 4 miles, when suddenly they saw Jesus walking on the water to the boat. They were terrified, but he called out to them, "Don't be afraid, I am here." They were eager to let him into the boat, and immediately they arrived at their destination. So, this is a real brief story. This is a real brief thing, but this is the fifth sign. And a few things real quick here is, this comes out of Mark chapter 6 as well, when that's where it says that Jesus went to a solitary place. Let's go to a solitary place to rest. And they set off the Sea of Galilee. I mean, when Jesus didn't come back, they were just like, okay, let's go. Could be indicated that Jesus told them to go, or to get into the boat, or to do whatever, but John doesn't explicitly say that in the way that Matthew and Mark do. So Matthew and Mark really hint that Jesus was like, hey, get in the boat and let's go. And so several of the disciples were fishermen. We got to remember this, like in the other storm story, when he gets up and says, hey, be quiet, right? And the disciples were scared. It's like these storms must be something, because these guys were fishermen. The Sea of Galilee was known for its storms. Like, it was a very deep. It was 600 feet below sea level. It was a very wild area for storms, and this made it to where the air and stuff like that, it could get in there and rush down, right, at the hillsides, and the wind could just kind of get caught up in this bowl that was kind of created. And so the Sea of Galilee was well known for its sudden and violent storms, and it could make this like kind of treacherous and dangerous. And so the disciples had already been in something like that, where Jesus was present with them in the boat, and he said, hey, peace be still, like all that stuff. But the disciples were scared. Remember, hey, we're going to drown. Don't you care? Like that instance. This time they're by themselves, and they're rowing, and it says that they've only gone 3 or 4 miles. So it feels like maybe they were rowing all night long. But it's clear that Jesus was continuing to watch them. Mark 6:48 tells us that Jesus saw them straining at rowing, for the wind was against them. And so Jesus clearly was watching them. Jesus was clearly present with them, even though he wasn't there. And that says something to me. It should say something to you, that Jesus is always there. Jesus always has his eye on us. For Jesus, though, it was enough to announce, hey, I am here. But Jesus wanted to do this to give them peace in this moment. Jesus gave them, I am here. I am here. I'm right here. He gave them what they needed spiritually, emotionally, physically. Jesus gave his disciples peace. When they know, hey, I am here. Doesn't that give you peace? When we hear Jesus say, I am here. I am here. I am here. Whatever we're facing, wherever we're at, I am here. Jesus was there with them, whether he was there with them, right? Jesus was watching them. Jesus was caring for them, just like he does for us. But there's something else that we ought to know here, that Jesus did not just get into the boat. Jesus had to be received. Jesus waits for us to welcome him into our boat. Jesus waits for us to welcome him into our life. He's not going to force himself on us. He's not going to barge in. He's not going to force himself. That may sound controversial. That may sound weird. That may sound anti-Jesus. But it's the truth, and it's in the Bible. Revelation tells us that Jesus stands at the door and knocks. He doesn't barge in. He doesn't throw the door open. He doesn't knock once. He doesn't, whatever. And, okay, they didn't answer. I'm just going to barge in. Nope, he waits. Jesus would have stood on that water all night long and watched his disciples do whatever it is they were doing. Jesus would have stood there and watched them if they didn't invite him in. Jesus wasn't going to barge onto the boat. When we let Jesus into our boat, when we let Jesus into our life, we will immediately arrive at our destination. What that means to me, and this is something I had never seen before, and this is what God does with the Bible. We see things like this story is familiar. Jesus walking on water. Like, it's a very familiar thing. But what I didn't catch ever before is it says they were eager to let him into the boat, and immediately they arrived at their destination. It doesn't say the storm calmed down, they rowed the rest of the way. They immediately arrived. Almost saying that when Jesus got in the boat, like they teleported to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. And just like that, when we invite Jesus into our boat, we immediately arrive at our final destination. We immediately arrive at heaven. Like there's nothing left, right? And when we accept Jesus into our life, our life is eternal. We then now have everlasting life when we invite Jesus into our heart. When we invite Jesus into our boat, we immediately have everlasting life. With the thief on the cross, when Jesus says, "Today you will be with me in paradise," instantaneous. That man let Jesus into his boat, and instantaneously he was in paradise. And that's what we get to look forward to when we invite Jesus into our boat. So I want to give you that opportunity to invite him into your boat, to open the door that he stands and he's knocking. He wants to come in. Because it says that stand at the door, open the door, and I will come in. He's not going to be invited and then, no, I don't want to. I changed my mind. Sorry, wrong door. Or if the disciples were like, "Hey, Jesus, come into the boat." No, you know what? You guys got this. I'm going to go back the other way. I'll see you on the other side. When he's invited in, Jesus comes in. So I want to give you this moment right now to open the door, to invite Jesus in. I'm going to offer a prayer that you just repeat after me, and then we'll have some next steps. So repeat this after me. Dear Jesus, I am a sinner. I believe that you died and rose from the dead to save me from my sins. I want to be with you in heaven forever. Jesus, forgive me of all my sins. I open my heart to you now and ask you to come into my heart as my personal Lord and Savior. In Jesus' name, amen. Jesus is the only name that gives us power over death. Jesus is the only name where we can have life and life eternal by the power of his name. Well done if you opened the door and you invited Jesus into your boat. Well done. I'm so thankful and so grateful that you've tuned in to listen to this. Now, always some next steps. Tell somebody about it. Tell your family, tell your friends. Get plugged into a local church. Do whatever you need to do to get all about Jesus. Because the Bible tells us that 2 are better than 1, 3 are even better. And if we can get in that community, the book of Genesis, right at the very beginning, tells us that it's not good for us to be alone. So with that, get plugged into a local church. Tell your family, tell your friends, so we can all get together, because we are in a war. The book of Ephesians chapter 6 tells us that we are in a war. And so we need to be together. We need other people. We need that community. And then dive into Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Get to know all you can about Jesus. Everything that you can about Jesus. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are the places to do that. John, the Gospel of John, as I said, it's about who Jesus is, what he's doing, what he does, and what that means, so that we can believe and have life by the power of his name. Matthew records the Sermon on the Mount, different parables, the teachings of Jesus. And then Mark and Luke as well, and then the rest of the New Testament, a majority of which is written by a guy by the name of Paul, who, just like you, opened the door to Jesus, and Jesus came into his life, and he wound up teaching and preaching the good news about Jesus. And the New Testament are letters that he wrote to the different churches that he started, and different people that were a part of his churches and a part of his life. And so, with that being said, I hope that this episode encouraged you and blessed you, and I hope you'll go to our website or YouTube or wherever and find more episodes, so that you can continue on this journey with Jesus. I hope that you'll come back next week as we open up that first I am statement. I mean, Jesus kind of said, I am here, right? But these I am statements are, once again, who Jesus is. And so I hope you'll dive back in with us as we continue on in our Shining Light series, as we continue on through this wonderful gospel, the Gospel of John. So I'll see you next week.